In a time and place when you can work from anywhere,
two ladies in their mid to late 27s have decided to.
And they're calling it workationing.
Sometimes the ladies have friends come out to visit.
This time it's Matt Simon of the Marijuana Policy Project.
He's here to talk about drugs in Medellín.
This guy really knows his stuff.
This is the Workationing Podcast.
So we're in New Hampshire. We are no longer in Medellín, and I can't tell you how excited I am to be away from that place.
Yeah, we're right here in exotic Manchester, New Hampshire.
At the Sky Palace. Very palatial out here.
It is, and we'll tell you more about the Sky Palace in a future episode.
We will, but now we have a very special guest. A guest star on Workationing.
We do.
We have Matt Simon of the Marijuana Policy Project here.
Yay. Matthew Simon, welcome.
So awesome to be here. Thank you.
So Matt, as I just said, what is your title, Matt?
My titles are New England Political Director and Legislative Analyst for the Marijuana Policy Project.
And true or false, you are responsible for the legislation that just legalized marijuana in Massachusetts and Maine.
I played some role in the ballot initiatives that did end marijuana prohibition in Massachusetts and Maine in the last election. Very proud of my colleagues' work who pushed that over the end. But yeah, marijuana is now legal in 8 states. MPPs had a big role in that, and I am super happy to be talking about something other than marijuana policy for a change, because it's the time of year when I talk about pretty much all marijuana all the time.
Well, I do think we are going to talk about some drugs.
We should.
Right, but God's work is very tiring.
Okay, so Matt is in New Hampshire with us right now. Matt lives in Manchester, New Hampshire, but Matt came out to visit in Medellín when we were about a month into our trip out there. So we thought that it would be great to have Matt on the podcast and talk about his experiences in Medellín. I'm really interested in hearing about your perspective on drug policy and how that might impact a place like Medellín. Because there are definitely a lot of drugs in Medellín. Okay, so Matt, what made you come to Medellín?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that the comments that I express in this interview are my own, and the opinions are my own, and do not reflect on my employer.
Fine print.
Fine print. Why did I want to come to Medellín? Well, I'm obviously very interested in the Workationing project that you Gringas are involved in, and I've followed it closely from the beginning. Really cool concept to me, wanted to be part of it. But Medellín in particular to me is a name that I've only ever heard in connection directly with drug cartels, the cocaine trade in particular. And as somebody who's been studying drug policy for more than a decade, I go to drug policy conferences. I'm really curious to know what kind of culture actually exists there, what life is like in this city that I could only begin to imagine.
Well, I think you just don't hang out in the digital nomads subreddit enough.
You're right.
Because if you were to go there, you would read all kinds of great things about Medellín that really have nothing to do with the drug trade or cartels.
The scenery is amazing.
It got us out here, that subreddit. Thanks, guys. So actually, you were involved with the workationing process before workationing even became a thing.
I remember we were hanging out in December and you were going through your logo designs, trying to figure out your logos and things like that. So
we do love that logo.
I love it too. The one you picked is perfect.
The cartoon, I like the cartoon too.
That's perfect.
Okay, so you've known me. We've been friends for like 10 years now.
Almost 10. Yeah.
We met when Ron Paul he didn't hit the scene first then, but it was in 2007. Yeah, he's very old, that Ron Paul.
He ran for president and came to New Hampshire. I'd been living in New Hampshire for about a year, and I was renting a room from a friend of mine, and, well, one day you showed up.
Yep.
A lot of other people.
It's your girl. Okay, so we had talked about Medellín when we booked the flight from Aguadilla to Medellín. You booked your flight. What was it? The drug thing that was compelling? Was it the fact that we were just out there? Like, what really made you book that ticket?
It worked out for my life that I was able to get away for a week. So from January to May, I'm generally working all the time and pretty crazy and can't imagine taking a vacation. But there's 1 week where the Vermont legislature just takes a week off for town meeting, and the New Hampshire Senate happened to be off that week as well. And those are the two legislatures that I spend all my time dealing with. So I had a week off pretty much. I thought it was going to be a week off. They ended up spending a lot of time listening to the New Hampshire House of Representatives while looking out over, the Medellín River Valley, if that's what it is. It worked out that I was able to do it. You Gringas were somewhere that I could reasonably get to, and it was a place that I found fascinating and really wanted to see for myself.
What were you expecting versus what did you get?
Well, we should preface this by saying that I don't speak a lick of Spanish.
None.
So five semesters of Italian and 3 years of Latin have left me with a general recognition of some basic fundamental not even words. So, but
Kelly and I are very, very excited by this, or we were at the time, because your lack of Spanish made our Spanish look just on point.
Oh yeah, I was relying on you two, which may not have been exactly optimal, but I did have enough Spanish to get in a cab at the airport with, by the way, the most insane human being I've ever been in a car with. And I'm certain that he thought that I worked for an auto racing outfit of some kind because he was trying to impress me. He was trying to get into, Formula One or something, because this guy made it. It's a 35, 40-minute drive from the Medellín airport to where you were.
It took us an hour and 15 minutes. Our cab driver was also very scary.
Oh, this guy got down the hill in 22, 24 minutes, something like that.
You showed up at the door, and I was like, how are you here so fast?
Yeah, and my hair was standing on end, and I...
You looked a little frazzled. You did.
I may have been a little frazzled. It was my introduction to Medellín, and, the guy didn't speak much English, but he gustoed the heck out of me, and he wanted to be my driver for the whole time I was around.
He gave you his card.
He did give me his card, and I did not call him.
I noticed that.
Value my life.
So once you got into Medellín proper and up into our penthouse suite, what did you think?
Wow. I mean, I'd seen the photos, I'd seen videos that you'd posted, so I was really looking forward to that. It was night when I arrived, so I got the night scene, and it's just this massive valley. It's huge, and mountains all around it. It's just this bowl of mountains surrounded by this huge valley, and there's a war going on in that valley between what's trying to be a rainforest, okay, all this vegetation that's just trying to take over the valley, and all of these huge buildings of this very somewhat modern city, and at night it's all lit up, and it's like something maybe out of the 80s, like some Miami Vice looking stuff.
Very Miami Vice out here.
Indeed.
Out there.
But by day, you can imagine going back in time a few hundred years and it being, natives running around, and yet it's this modern city in the middle of what's trying to be a rainforest.
So when we came out, we had already been there for when you came out, we had been there for already about a month. And I think that we had normalized some things
Quote unquote.
Normalized, right? Some things that were pretty weird, and we knew that we were going to be staying there for a while, so we might as well just get comfortable and just sit on in that misogyny and culture, and so that's what we did. But then you came in late into that already. What was that like for you?
Wow. Yeah, it was really interesting. You had definitely found a groove. I don't know that normal is the right adjective for it, but you were in a groove. You were being productive. You were waking up and living your life every day, but certain things. Obviously, you weren't leaving the house alone, either one of you. You were going out in pairs.
Yep.
You were, there were things to be apprehensive about, and you were one by one telling me what those were, and it became clear to me certainly by the second day that there had been some scary stuff in that town, and that being in a pretty secure building was a really good place to spend a lot of the time.
Yes.
And even in that building, some pretty scary folks. And
were you scared? What was it like to be? Because you're a tall man. You're 6'4".
I am.
So you're a tall. You've dark hair. You could look like a local, maybe ish.
Yeah, they can't necessarily tell if I'm a gringo or not. I think
when you open your mouth and it's pretty clear.
When I open my mouth, it's extremely clear. But if I don't open my mouth and just, hide behind my Ray-Bans, it might be all right.
And your swarthiness.
Yeah, I'm half Lebanese, so nobody knows what to see in that. I have somewhat dark complexion. I could probably pass for a Colombian, if especially if I spent a few days on that rooftop pool, I would probably be able to do it. But as long as I don't open my mouth. But the people in the building, I mean, you had told me there were sex tourists in the building. I had background on that, but I definitely experienced it for myself. I mean, I went up to the little workout room. I'm on the bike, right? I'm just tooling around on the exercise bike, and these two girls walk in. They can't be 16. They're 16, 17-ish,
right?
Something like that. They're wearing bikinis, and they walk in and they hop on the equipment and start exercising. And this dude walks in behind them with them. He's probably 40, 42, 45,
I think I know that guy.
I was going to say, I bet I know exactly who that was.
Was it Greg?
No, it wasn't Greg. It was the other guy.
It was Greg.
Greg needs to go home.
Yeah, it was the other guy we shared an elevator with another time, and I was like, oh, hey, that guy was the guy.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah. He saw me there, and he's like, oh, he didn't really make eye contact, but the girls were really nice, and they're like, hi, da 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 da, and just what are you going to do? And the answer is you're not going to do anything.
Nothing, as it turns out.
You're going to ride your bicycle.
And pretend you don't see these underage prostitutes.
I like to ride my bicycle.
So aside from the sex tourists, was there anything else scary that you saw that was just kind of unsettling to you?
Well, yeah. I mean, you do see the misogyny throughout the culture, and you do. I mean, this is something I think I'd experienced as a teacher for 7 years, having students from all over the world, and realizing that they're from cultures very different from ours, realizing what many people take for granted about the United States, that equality is just the way it is, and if you're not for that, you're nuts. To people coming certainly from the Middle East, or I've had students from Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and China, countries where women are not treated as equals, and they think it's kind of weird that you think they should be. Even the women may think that way. So Colombia, it seemed really, really thick with that. All the women were with their boyfriends. It was, and they feel like they have to get all dolled up to go out of the house, and I kind of like the yoga pants,
I also like the yoga pants.
Also, yes.
Kelly and I are on Team Yoga Pants. We were trying to show those ladies what freedom looked like with our flip-flops and our elastic waists.
Mm-hmm. All that range of motion.
Oh, I could have high-kicked somebody if I needed to.
So, Matt, though, I feel like while you were there, I got the impression that I feel like you were a little concerned for us. Is that a correct statement?
Have you always wanted to dine with cartel heads? Not at the same table, but maybe at the same... You can see them. They look very important.
Yeah, I'm not my cartel head radar is not real sharp. I'm not entirely sure what I'm seeing. So in the sense that this was me trying to figure out what's going on in Medellín, well, I saw a lot of foreign people speaking a foreign language. I don't really know what was going on. But there were certainly some conclusions that I think, able to draw, or at least it gave me some perspective. So, like, for example, the buildings. We know that the U.S. war on drugs, right? It was declared in the early 70s. Drugs had been illegal since the really 1919, but there hadn't been enforcement in the Nixon, era. They declared war on drugs. They started enforcing more, and that just drove more people to an illicit market for substances. If there's no supply, if you crack down on the supply, you put the suppliers in jail, then who's going to be the supply next? And it's going to be somebody.
But you can bet there's always going to be a supply.
There's always going to be a supply because but in the 80s, Ronald Reagan was elected president, doubled down on everything Nixon did, way ramped up enforcement. And by doing so, and this is where I first heard of Medellín, was from reading a piece by Milton Friedman, an economist, about the war on drugs. And he pointed out that the actual effect of U.S. drug policy was to protect the cartel, was to arrest all of its competition, because you're very rarely going to take out an entire cartel. That takes like a decade, and then there's going to be another cartel to step in and take its place. But if you bust all the locals, you bust the medium level suppliers, you put them all in jail, somebody's going to show up with supply, and it's going to be a bigger, badder dude with bigger guns who cares way less about human rights. And we created a situation where there was an opportunity for people who were ruthless enough to make billions of dollars and become kings in their Latin American countries for a time. So it resulted in this massive influx of wealth, during which it's well documented the cartels were more powerful than any government in Colombia.
Right.
And most of what you see happening, many of the functions that we normally associate with governments are functions that were actually performed by cartels. And we know that's the case historically. It's very unclear to me what role cartels still have. But you see a city that you know was built largely by cartels, by a handful of major companies. And it almost resembles American corporatism in a way, because you have a few, a very tiny number of major players that make everything. So in Colombia, it could almost be like a socialist country. All the buildings look pretty much the same. They're like 4 different designs.
Yep.
And
4 choices.
Yeah, these were built in 1982 and 83. They were used a slightly reddish-hued brick and blah blah blah. But they're all the same. And then these were maybe built in 1987, and they have a different look, but it was all the same company with the same workers and the same whatever. So there's a lot of wealth there. You can tell that a lot of money got put into building infrastructure and nice bridges. It's amazingly clean. I mean.
Yeah, actually, something that I knew one other thing besides drug cartels when it came to Medellín before I went there, which was I used to date an urban planner, and Medellín is considered one of the best designed urban environments in the world.
Tell that to our Uber driver.
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily agree with all of that. I can see that the public transportation is very good. It's like, but that you can see the investment in the infrastructure. It's a beautiful city, is what I just concurring there. But yeah, I don't know. A lot of one-way streets wouldn't be the way I would design it. But yeah, people come from around the world to learn how to build a city, and that's where that money came from.
All those cokeheads at the clubs built this beautiful city. Yes, thanks, Miami. Thank you. So it sounds like the war on drugs has created an environment that is very hospitable to cartels. Very, very scary cartels. And we talked about the war on drugs, or you explained how the war on drugs has kind of led up to this. But my question is, what is there to do about this? How do we come back from it? Is there a way to come back from it? And if so, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, these are obviously not easy questions. And again, I work for the Marijuana Policy Project, and I only officially am able to have opinions on marijuana policy. We don't take positions on the larger war on drugs. And marijuana is not really it's not coming from Colombia. I mean, maybe in the 70s, marijuana was coming to the U.S. from Colombia, but not so much anymore. It's really cocaine that's associated with that region. But first and foremost, I think what's most important, as with marijuana prohibition, recognizing what our current policy is and what the effects of our current policy is and being honest about them. So these laws were designed to create a drug-free America. The laws that were passed during the Reagan administration speak specifically to that. We're going to create a drug-free America by...
How's that working out?
By 1995, I think they were going to do it.
Oh.
I mean, and they were going to do it by just...
Mission accomplished.
Yes.
Mission accomplished.
By saying no.
I don't see anybody cracky looking
No.
out here on the streets of Manchester.
Really not. And we know the reality, and in the last few years in the United States, as we've seen the opiate problem kind of snowball in New Hampshire and elsewhere, it's you can't say winning or losing in the war on drugs. You can't even, it's really clear that, okay, for example, well, as somebody who's been identified as a libertarian in the past, I have also been called another thing, which is utopian.
Okay.
Right? Libertarians are utopian. You think, if marijuana is legal, then everything's just going to be fine and blah, blah, blah. No, prohibition is the most utopian policy I've ever seen. The idea that by passing a law and empowering police to arrest people, that you're going to change the behavior of tens of millions of people in the United States is not realistic. And what you end up doing is shoving an entire multi-billion-dollar industry way underground, where you have no ability to control it or regulate it, no ability to really educate people. People are buying substances. They have no idea how they were produced, what's in them, how potent they are. That's a recipe for the worst possible drug policy. And I think that's what we see in the United States. So recognizing first and foremost that things like, Plan Colombia, that was the multi-bazillion-dollar project that our federal government was involved in many times.
Plan Colombia?
Yes, Plan Colombia.
I'm unfamiliar with this.
Well, I'm not the best person to talk about the details, but it was, to eradicate coca fields, and it also involved involvement in the Colombian Civil War that was going on for a long time between the FARC and the government. So the United States was very involved in Colombia, and trying to on the premise that if you wipe out the supply, then you solve the problem. If you take out all the coca fields, there won't be any more cocaine, so people won't do cocaine and you won't have a problem. Well, we only know that if you do succeed, which, you may win in one area, but you're just knocking out that one area. It springs up in Bolivia. It springs up anywhere else where cocaine can be grown, as long as people have an economic incentive. As long as getting cocaine to market means more money for a poor farmer's family than getting some other product to market, they're going to want to grow it, and they're going to grow it. And we're going to have this illicit underground economy that enriches the worst people.
It really does. And history is littered with examples of prohibition helping out just the sketchiest and worst people in society. When you look at alcohol prohibition back in the day, that's when Al Capone really came up, and I'm out.
And killed a lot of people.
Yeah, killed a lot of people. So,
no, it became clear that, and in that case, it was only a 13-year experiment, and people remembered what it had been like before, and then they saw what prohibition did to the country. They saw the murder rate skyrocket. They saw, A, drinking didn't go away. B, in some ways it became more problematic because people shifted from drinking beer or wine and started drinking bathtub gin or denatured industrial alcohol, and that's where we got all these terrible drinks that are still served and associated with American bars as ways to make barely non-toxic, or in some cases very toxic, alcohol palatable. And it also shoved it underground, made it cool. The speakeasies in the 20s were a roaring period, in part because of prohibition, that people wanted to party even harder when you made it illegal. And with drug prohibition, marijuana prohibition, it's been 70 plus years. Nobody remembers what it was like before, when you could walk into a pharmacy and buy products over the counter that contain cannabis or cocaine or whatever. But it's a really big shift. But back to the major question, we're spending all of this money on eradication, on the myth that if you eradicate supply that you're going to win. And what we see that's been actually successful is countries like Portugal have decriminalized possession. They're no longer using resources trying to arrest people and incarcerate them. They're instead applying those resources towards treating drugs as a public health issue.
They can't even keep drugs out of jails.
No, we've had case after case in New Hampshire. Last year in New Hampshire, a homeless man named Jeffrey Pendleton, who had been busted for a small amount of marijuana, and he had a prior, so they incarcerated him for a few days. And while he was incarcerated waiting for his court date, he got a hold of fentanyl, ingested it, and died in the prison. So it's, if you can't keep drugs out of the jails and the prisons, you can't keep them out of the schools. We need a policy that recognizes that drugs are going to exist for the rest of our lives. We need to figure out how to deal with them. In some cases, that may be regulating supply. In some cases, that's honest, reality-based drug education, not to just say no, this is your brain on drugs stuff that I grew up with. And that's really where I'm coming from on this issue. I was a college instructor for 7 years, and this is the biggest, most divisive issue I ever talked about in the classroom. Some of my students believe marijuana is completely harmless and that it cures whatever ailments, and the other half believe it's just this terrible drug on par with heroin. And everybody's afraid to talk about it. And over the last several years, I'm very happy that has changed. People are more able to talk about marijuana and drug policy. They realize that the cliches of the 80s were not helpful, and that we need to be reality-based and thoughtful and compassionate in our approach.
How did your perspective shift once you got back to the U.S., having been in Medellín? Did it change you at all, your trip to Medellín?
I think it may have. On the positive sense, it made me really want to travel more. It made me want to throw myself in more challenging experiences and see more things that will blow my mind, visually taste more things, breathe more different air, more different places. I've always had an abstract desire to do that, and I never had the means or the time, and now I'm at a point in my life where I think I'll be able to do that more, so I'm really excited by it. At the same time, it helped me understand some of my limitations and some of my unique challenges. One is that I'm a very light sleeper, and you know this. Anytime I travel, I should bring earplugs, 1, sleep mask, 2. I should bring those things because they're hard to find at the drogeria down the street.
La Farmacia.
Some of them say farmacia, some say drogeria.
Oh, okay. Well, my Spanish, I'm still working on it.
But yeah, it gave me a sense of perspective and really, I mean, I spent 2 days listening to the New Hampshire House of Representatives on my earbuds while looking out over the strange city. And, you know, I was annoyed, as I would always be, listening to the New Hampshire House Speaker talk. He's kind of a boorish human being. He thinks that my friends and I belong in jail, I think, and he's not a very enlightened person. I don't think, and I don't like listening to him talk.
Well, you're such an unsavory character, Matt Simon.
Well, I could say the same about House Speaker Sean Jasper in New Hampshire, but
Shots fired. Shots fired.
We don't really love each other. It's kind of the case. But I would rather, if I have to listen to House Speaker Sean Jasper talk, I would rather do it from a place like Medellín, looking out over a weird city, because it gives me that perspective. It reminds me that when I'm caught up in the moment of stress of lobbying and my whole life seems to be stuck on this one bill, whether it passes or not, that there's a whole big old world out there, and these people don't know who the hell Sean Jasper is, and they don't care, and they shouldn't. So maybe I shouldn't either. Maybe not for a week.
Yeah, take a week off. Opt out for a week, gringo.
Vacations are great. Workation is great if you can make it work with your job. For me, it might be possible, more as a summer fall thing. It doesn't work during legislative sessions, I don't think. But we'll see,
I left Medellín with a shiny new case of PTSD. Do you have any PTSD from your experience there? You weren't there long enough?
Yeah.
We had a different experience on account of you having a penis?
It may have been my penis.
If it wasn't the penis,
I did
it's
not
gotta be
show
the
it to
beard.
anybody. I just want to be very clear that I did not wave it around on any of the...
Just walking down the street.
None of the Calles or Carreras did I show my penis, but I am 6'4", I do have a beard, and I'm not even necessarily very gringo-y looking. So I got by just fine, and I was able to get into your new normal, but I could tell you were under a lot of stress and that you maybe didn't even realize it yet until you got out. So I'm so glad.
Were you there for the drones?
I wasn't. I heard about that. Nobody told me about that until
I specifically did not tell you about that.
Yeah, I would have been a little upset probably by that. I probably wouldn't have liked that.
That's how my PTSD is manifested. Whenever I see a bird, just any bird flying, my first thought is drone. And I get very apprehensive. And I know that is not something that I had going on before Colombia.
I go to restaurants and I see it could be a father-daughter pair. And I'm just like, well, that's some underage prostitution I'm looking at.
And it may be, but
Oh, God.
That's not how your eyes used to work.
No, it's not how my eyes used to work. And just the feeling of being on edge all the time.
Right.
I can't imagine being in actual war.
I think it's rather good that you're back in New Hampshire for a little while, just to...
Were you starting to get worried about me? You looked like you were...
Yeah, maybe a little. Yeah, very happy to have you back for a little
What
bit.
was it that you were worried about? Were you worried about like the safety, like the actual physical safety? Were you worried that, like, I guess, because I'm trying to think of what I was concerned about. Obviously, the first concern is always physical safety, and it was very scary to me to hear Santiago say that he goes by Santiago because he doesn't want to get kidnapped and he doesn't want people to know his real name. That was okay. All right. Things you don't hear in the U.S., So then I began worrying about, well, is somebody going to kidnap me and Kelly?
Right.
They're going to have to take both of us. And I have been told that you never get into a car with somebody. Like, you just let them kill you on the street.
You have to kill me on the street. You will have to kill me on the street.
So Kelly and I aren't going to get into any cars if we're kidnapped. We're just going to be killed on the street, is what we have talked about. We have had that conversation. I think the reality of it was, I don't think that we were really ever in any physical danger. I think that you're looking at me, you almost got your phone stolen. I think that like theft is a thing. If you're just going to take my shit and run, I don't want to say I'm okay with it. I'd prefer that to maybe a beating on top of it, or like a drag me to the bushes and I don't want to think about it kind of thing. Right. But mentally it was very difficult.
It really was. So what did you think, Matt? Like, because you got to see Kari before. You and I are just now becoming friends. It's lovely. Glad to have you aboard. But you were hanging out with Kari before she left, and then saw her in Medellín, and now you're seeing her after. Like I guess what were your concerns, and do you think there's been a big change?
Well, I was concerned about your physical well-being. Having a very secure building that you were in gave me significant peace of mind.
Just locked in there with lots of sex tourists and dangerous men.
Right. Seeing photos of the building, understanding the security situation, I thought, yeah, okay, I can go there for a week. They've been there a whole month. They're fine. I'm going to be fine.
We're still alive.
It's all going to be fine. And yes, you're still alive. But yeah, I was worried about your state of mind and your whole project. I mean, workationing is a delicate balance between work and life. You've set all these goals for the success of workationing. You have a business, obviously, to run that was your entire life until this became a big chunk of it. And, that got to function on a really high level, and being in a high stress environment challenges that. I think you Gringas pulled through it with flying colors, but a little recharge is probably awesome, and reset those filters a little bit. Maybe the next step will be a place that's maybe a little less challenging for the next jump.
Maybe next time I see a bird, I'll think, oh, a bird.
That would be nice.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to the next time I see a bird thinking it's a bird.
I'm excited for you to get into that headspace. I'm looking forward to. I feel dirty. Medellín made me feel dirty looking at the things that I saw. I didn't much care for it. I felt very weak and impotent when it came to doing anything about it. Right. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing to do other than to look at it, and you can't feel okay with. I couldn't make myself ever feel okay with what I was looking at. And now that I'm out of that environment and I'm back to quote unquote normal, I see not only were we losing our sense of weird, but we were also kind of getting a crash course in what the world is really like for women and for just people in general in other areas. And I'm grateful for the experience. I think that it's good to have that broader perspective, but like the mental stuff that I had to go with and that I'm still kind of battling to get that education, it was costly. It was not a free education.
No.
So I guess that's it on the PTSD front. I'm still like, I'm still shaken by the things that we saw out there. And I think it's going to take a while to wash it all off. And
if there's another lesson for me, it's that I really value my life in New Hampshire and Vermont. I feel like if something terrible happens, if something awful is going on, I know state legislators. I know lots of state legislators, in fact. I can get a bill introduced. I can get it through the legislature probably. I feel like I have power to do something in New Hampshire or Vermont. If there was a terrible problem, it would be very hard for me to live anywhere where I felt that impotent all the time. So for me, I think workationing might be something I could do for a month or 2 or 3 a year, maybe 4, but I need to have a home, I think, and I need to feel more powerful probably in that home than I do when I'm in a place that's as challenging as Medellín.
What did you think of workationing with us? Was it what you expected?
I think it was, and it was challenging for me because I needed to work. I needed to not have a completely full kick-ass work week, but I needed to work a fair amount, and there were a lot of distractions and things that we wanted to do together. So yeah, I got my work done, and I saw a bunch of crazy stuff and played Tejo and ate amazing food, and the experiences I will never forget. I mean, you how much of our lives do we just forget? We live it and it's gone. And I'm not going to forget that week in Medellín. I'm going to remember so many things about that week vividly, in vivid living color, probably for the very rest of my life. And so for that, it was invaluable, priceless to me.
Would you ever go back to Medellín?
You know, I don't think I would, because I think, you know, maybe when, you know, if we're 70 and we want to reminisce, it'd be pretty cool to see how it's changed. But no, it's not going to be in the top on my top 50 places to go. I want to see something new and amazing next.
Would you recommend it to anybody?
It's possible that I would, but that A, somebody who speaks Spanish, B, somebody who's either male or very experienced traveling in Latin American countries and understands what that's going to be about. And yeah, I mean, the experience has been second to none. It almost defies description. I would, for certain people, recommend it, but they can get on Reddit and find out why for themselves, I hear.
Yes, Reddit, the best place to search for vacation destinations, workation destinations, or not. Or not, maybe.
Maybe not.
So maybe we'll just find some other place to go to that I don't source on Reddit.
What I used to do when I was a kid, I had a globe. We just give it a big spin and close our eyes and put our fingers down and say, I want to go there someday.
You know, Kiwi.com does that. You go to Kiwi and you can search for anywhere, and it's kind of like that, except for there are prices on this globe, and it tells you where the cheap flights are. And then you just pop up Airbnb and you see what the housing situation looks like, where the cheap flights are. And then maybe you just double check your sources on Reddit. You know?
Double checking is good.
Double check those sources before you book the flight. Well, I think that wraps it. Do you have anything else that you want to add?
You know, I'm just really excited about how this may fit into my life, you know, this globe-trotting stuff. I dreamed of it many years ago. When I quit teaching, I had an online essay scoring job that I could live from anywhere. And for a while there, I thought a lot about this. And for the last 10 years, I kind of haven't. So your really cool little project has made me imagine myself as a potential globetrotter, and I would love to explore that at some point. Probably not when the legislatures are in session next time.
And probably not to Medellín.
Probably not.
But I'm excited for you to get some more stamps in that passport.
I'm excited to get them.
Well, Matt Simon, it has been a pleasure.
It has. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of the Workationing Podcast. If you like what you heard here, make sure to like, rate, subscribe, and leave us a review on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, or wherever else on the internet you're hearing this.
You can also go to workationing.com. That's workationing.com.
Unique New York, unique New York, unique New York, unique New York, unique New York. Rubber baby buggy bumpers, rubber baby buggy bumpers, rubber baby buggy bumpers, rubber baby buggy bumpers, rubber baby buggy bumpers. Oh my God.
It's so warm. It's so nimble with the lips. So nimble.
What's the other one?
Can't trip him up.
Well, the other one is kind of a story, but it's about Betty. Betty bought some butter, but the butter Betty bought made Betty's batter bitter, so Betty bought some better butter, make the bitter batter better, but the bitter batter made the better butter bitter.
What?
That is impressive.
That is very impressive.
Tell Betty.